At the Salix Leaf Complex, Kevin had just served Dorothy and Lily their dinner after spending almost an hour cooking. While Lily complimented his culinary skills, Dorothy told him that cooking was the only thing that he was able to do well. And when Lily told her mother not to pick on his faults, she said that she was simply pushing him to be better for his own good, to which Kevin awkwardly agreed. After dinner, Kevin decided to go out for a walk, so Lily went along with him. At the same time, in the Anderson family's mansion, Phoebe was sitting on the sofa and staring at Kevin's picture. She'd secretly taken this photo while Kevin wasn't paying attention. Truman Anderson, who was sitting opposite her, sighed heavily when he saw his daughter acting like this. "Phoebe, why don't you put that photo down? As your father, I have something I'd like to say to you." Truman paused for a second before speaking again. "You aren't getting any younger. Although it's not a problem for me to support you, I do think it's time for you to get married. After all, many of your former classmates are already married now, and soon they'll also become parents." Truman hesitated for a moment, then continued. "Now that the Hayes family has been destroyed, you no longer have any ties with them anymore. But even though Kevin is an outstanding young man, he's already someone else's husband. So you have to stop pining for him. You can't put off living your life for him forever, can you? Anyway, over the past 2 days, I've found a few good young men for you to consider. And like Kevin, they're all very fine people. Do you think you can find some time to meet with them?" Phoebe's face slowly turned serious when she heard her father's sincere words. "Dad, I know you mean well, but even if it's impossible for Kevin to marry me, I won't marry anyone else. He's the only one I'll love for the rest of my life. Besides, it's not like there's a 0% chance that we'll end up together. Anything can happen, Dad." "But he's married, Phoebe. You can't bank on what-ifs. Can't you see that you're only hurting yourself in the process?" Truman didn't know what else to say. "I know what I'm doing, Dad. Please don't make any mention of this anymore." Phoebe took Kevin's photo and immediately got up from the sofa to go upstairs. Her father took a long breath and shook his head. Then he took out his phone to call Kevin. Meanwhile, in the dean's office of the Healing Arts School, Owen Sullivan was exaggerating his account of Kevin's actions towards him. "Dean Ford, you can't tolerate having Kevin around here anymore. That kid is too arrogant." Owen recalled the scene where his energy base had been sealed off because of Kevin, after which he was brutally beaten up by several bodyguards. The fury deep inside him was growing stronger and stronger. Wayne Ford glanced at him. "Did something happen between you and Kevin? As far as I know, he isn't the type to casually cause trouble." "Dean Ford, I just followed your instructions and asked him nicely to come back here with me. But as soon as he got off the plane, he immediately got some men to beat me up. And I wasn't able to defend myself because he seemed to have slipped something in my drink when we were still on the plane," Owen said angrily. "Look at how badly beaten I look right now. It's simply an insult to the authority of our entire school. If word of this were to get out, how would the Healing Arts School be able to keep its reputation among the great powers after this?" "Then what do you want me to do?" Wayne looked at him with interest. "Send a powerful expert to bring him back immediately, then seal off his energy base permanently and imprison him in the basement until he dies," Owen demanded firmly. The office fell into silence as soon as he finished speaking. Wayne Ford just looked at him quietly. He neither objected to his request nor did he agree to it. After some time, Wayne Ford finally spoke. "You're dismissed. I'll handle this matter myself." "Then what will you do about Kevin? Did I just get beaten up for nothing?" Owen stubbornly refused to leave until he got what he wanted. "Get out right now." Wayne's voice instantly became several times louder, and his tone instantly shifted from calm to very harsh. Owen Sullivan suddenly shivered and didn't dare to disobey the dean. He quickly nodded in understanding and left the office. As he passed by the school field and looked up at the stars in the sky, Owen Sullivan clenched his fists tightly. "Kevin, don't think that I'll let this matter go just because the dean is protecting you. Just wait and see." Owen thought to himself with a sour expression. Then he walked quickly towards the school library. Back in the dean's office, Wayne Ford was looking at a thick stack of documents. All of them detailed everything Kevin had done in St. Louis. Even if he'd simply said something insignificant to someone, he had recorded everything without missing a single word. Wayne stood up and sighed.
The Morris family, the Stratus Group, and even the Reaper Squad have all reached out in some form and made their presence felt. It feels like Kevin's possession of the Power Pill formula has really attracted their attention.
Then he stood by the window and gazed off into the distance.
Night King, your game has gotten too complex in such a short amount of time. With all of these different players and moving parts, can Kevin still withstand the pressure of being the chosen one?
Meanwhile, Kevin had just returned to the Salix Leaf complex. After taking a shower, he went to the study. It had been a few days since he had last had some time to himself, so he decided to spend his free time practicing some of the meditative techniques that Catherine Swinton had previously taught him. Suddenly, his phone rang. When he checked his screen, he saw that it was Truman Anderson calling. "Mr. Anderson, it's quite late. Shouldn't you already be getting some rest?" Kevin asked in surprise. "Kevin, it seems that you're really busy these days. I actually called you more than 10 times before you finally answered my call." You could hear the dissatisfaction in Truman's tone of voice. Kevin scratched his head awkwardly as he thought of a random excuse to give him. "Sorry about that. My phone battery died." The truth was that he'd been walking with Lily earlier and his phone was in the pocket of his coat. However, because it was in silent mode, he didn't notice any of Truman's phone calls. "By the way, Mr. Anderson, why did you call me?" Kevin asked politely. Since Truman was Phoebe's father, Kevin naturally had to be more modest when speaking with him. "Why do you think I'm calling you, you little brat? Of course it's because I want to ask you something. What exactly are your intentions with my daughter?" Truman's anger, which he'd been keeping inside for many years, instantly exploded. A violent temper emerged from the bottom of his heart. "If you really like my daughter, then divorce Lily immediately. My daughter will never be someone else's mistress, so unless you lawfully choose to be with her over your wife, then the two of you will never be lovers." Truman continued. "The Anderson family has an excellent reputation in Chicago, so it's not like my daughter is a piece of fake jewelry that no one wants. Kevin, you have to give me an explanation right now. Do you seriously like my daughter? Otherwise, if you just want to fool around with her, it would be best to leave Phoebe immediately and never contact her again. And if you don't, you'll have to face my wrath." The more Truman Anderson spoke, the more enraged he became. Ever since the time his daughter got engaged to Jared Hayes and moved to Detroit, he'd only seen Phoebe looking more and more haggard. At first, Truman thought that things would get better once she was back in Chicago, but it seemed that her love for Kevin had only increased, especially after he rescued her from the Hayes family. And as a father, there was no need to mention how much pain he felt whenever he saw Phoebe spending her days just helplessly pining over Kevin. Kevin opened his mouth to talk, but nothing came out. He wanted to say something, but his words were stuck in his throat and he couldn't spell them out. He could only silently accept Truman Anderson's questioning and his judgment. "I called you tonight just to give you a chance to explain yourself. I know that young people like you think differently about these things compared to my generation, but you also have to think about Phoebe's situation. After all, she's a single woman, and you're already a married man. If others find out that the two of you are casually seeing each other, what will they think of my daughter?" Truman tried his best to explain his sentiments to Kevin. "Kevin, I know that you're someone who does things on a large scale, and I also want Phoebe to thrive as a strong and independent woman outside of who she marries in the future. But damn it, you're all that she thinks about these days, so I just hope that you don't delay her happiness for the rest of her life by being selfish and indecisive. If my daughter means anything at all to you, come to my house tomorrow to have a good talk with her." Without waiting for Kevin's reply, Truman Anderson hung up the phone. In the back of his mind, Kevin always had an inkling of what Phoebe meant to him. It was just that he never had the chance to think about it properly. But now that Truman had forced him to face the issue, he started to feel very conflicted. Thinking about all the little things that had happened between the two of them set off a powerful wave of emotions in him. However, Kevin suddenly regained his senses when he noticed someone's aura nearby. He quickly put away the meditation book that he'd been reading. A second later, a figure appeared outside the window. "Who are you?" Kevin looked at the unfamiliar face outside the window, and the spiritual energy in his body started circulating rapidly around him. The man opened the window and jumped into the study. Then he dropped to one knee and bowed his head in front of Kevin.
"Greetings, Messenger. The head of the administrators is inviting you to meet with her."
The head of the administrators? Kevin slightly raised his eyebrows. He knew very well that the administrators were among the highest-ranking members of the Alliance. However, he hadn't been in contact with them in a long time. Why did the group's leader suddenly come looking for him? Could it be that the Alliance director sent her here? Kevin thought to himself. After Truman Anderson called Kevin to angrily confront him about his intentions with Phoebe, he was forced to sit down and properly think about what she meant to him. However, while experiencing a wave of emotions as he recalled their previous interactions, Kevin suddenly regained his senses when he noticed someone's aura nearby. Just then, a man entered the study through the window and informed Kevin that the head of the administrators wanted to meet with him. Having had no contact with the Alliance for a long time, Kevin began wondering if the Alliance director was behind this. Kevin couldn't help but smile fondly when he thought about the Alliance director and how much she'd helped him.
"Messenger, the head of the administrators is currently waiting for you."
The man didn't know what Kevin was thinking about and could only do his best to help Kevin snap back to reality. "Where is she waiting for me?" Kevin tried to control his breath and calm himself down so he could regain his focus.
"She's in a forest not far from here,"
the man answered respectfully. "Okay, let's go then." Just as Kevin was about to leave the study, he suddenly thought of another thing. He quickly took out a pen and paper and wrote some things down to hand them to the man. "By the way, this is my phone number. If the Alliance needs anything from me in the future, just call. This place is where I live, so if I catch anyone from the Alliance sneaking in here again at night in the future, don't blame me for showing them no mercy." Kevin's voice seemed to drop a couple of octaves when he gave his warning. Kevin didn't want Lily and Dorothy to be involved any longer when it came to matters of the great powers. After everything that they'd already been through because of him, he hoped that he could afford them some peace and safety from now on. The man nodded his head in understanding as they both left the Salix Leaf complex. With this person leading the way, Kevin quickly arrived at the place where the head of the administrators was waiting for him. It was actually a small forest on the edge of a graveyard. The night wind was blowing lightly and the leaves in the forest were rustling. And if it wasn't for Kevin's courage, he might not have dared to go inside. He finally saw the head of the administrators. She was wearing a long black dress and her hair was so long that it had reached all the way down to her waist. Given the setting that she'd chosen, she looked like the female lead in a horror movie. "Are you into spooky stuff or something? Choosing this place as our meeting point was quite an interesting touch." Kevin joked awkwardly and crossed his arms in front of his chest. As he scanned the area, he felt a slight chill run down his spine. Nowadays, technology has improved so much, you can never be too careful. And with surveillance cameras being installed all over the place, I've chosen this spot to avoid being picked up by the spies of the major schools. The head of the administrators explained as she turned around to face Kevin. Paired with her expressionless face, the tone of each word she spoke was quite ominous. Then she slightly waved to a few of her assistants, indicating that they should leave to give some space for her to talk to Kevin alone. They immediately obeyed, bowing their heads respectfully to the two of them. Then they disappeared into the forest in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, the woman knelt down in front of Kevin. "Greetings, Messenger. My name is Shannon Tate, and I'm the head of the administrators." According to the rules of the Alliance, although her rank as an administrator was very high, it still couldn't compare to a messenger like Kevin. "If there's anything you want to tell me, stand up and say it right away. Otherwise, if there's nothing else, I'll be on my way back home." Kevin really didn't want to stay in this creepy place any longer than he had to. "Messenger, you really don't remember me, do you? Back then, you saved me and a few others from those evil men of the Myriads. At that time, I even thanked you personally." Shannon Tate seemed to get a little emotional thinking about it. Kevin frowned slightly as he listened to her. After thinking about it carefully for a couple of seconds, he finally remembered what the woman was referring to. When Brett Stewart had first recruited him to join the Myriads, more than 10 beautiful women were suddenly brought in to help him celebrate. After finding out that they'd been captured against their will, Kevin freed them all. It was because of that incident that he was brought over to the headquarters by the Alliance director, and soon after becoming a messenger, he was assigned to an undercover mission at the Healing Arts School, which sparked a whole chain of events that eventually led to where he was today. "I remember now. I wasn't expecting that you would be the one meeting with me today. It's been a long time since I last saw you, and now you've become the head of the administrators in the Alliance. Congratulations," Kevin said with a smile. "I remember the day we met quite deeply, and I'm forever indebted to you for saving my life, Messenger. Not wanting to waste the second chance that you've afforded me, I trained day and night, working hard until I got into the Alliance Director's good graces. That's why I was lucky to be promoted to the head of the administrators." Shannon stared at Kevin and explained, "Now that I've finally seen you again, I'll never leave your side. I shall follow and serve you with my life, Messenger." "What?" Kevin was completely stunned. "I'm grateful and flattered by your offer, but there's no need to react like this. After all, as head of the administrators, your status is different now. I wouldn't dare to let you be some kind of servant for me." Kevin waved his hands to show his refusal. If the Alliance leader ever found out about this, he'd definitely kill Kevin in anger. "Even if I won't serve you as my leader, I can still serve you in other ways. Don't you think I'm pretty, Messenger?" Shannon suddenly sounded flirtatious. "You can rest assured that I've kept my purity intact. I only hope that one day I can thank you properly." Kevin was completely confused and flustered when he heard this. He had no idea how to respond. When did his luck with women become so good? Why was this beautiful woman practically throwing herself into his arms and offering herself to him? It had to be said that Shannon Tate was a stunning woman, with an athletic figure and outstanding looks. However, given the creepy atmosphere of their location, this all seemed to come out of left field. Wasn't this how people usually get killed in horror movies? Moreover, as tempting as her offer was, he already had enough on his plate with Lily and Phoebe at the moment, so he really couldn't afford another complication like this. Besides, if word got out within the Alliance, he would have to explain himself not only to the Alliance leader but to the director as well, and he didn't know which of the two was worse. Let's not worry about that for now. Kevin tried his best to control himself. Anyway, why did you come here all the way from the Alliance's headquarters? It can't be just to chat with me and thank me, can it? Actually, I was sent here by the Alliance leader. He ordered me to tell you to return to the headquarters within 3 days. Shannon explained as she regained her senses and remembered the reason she'd been sent in the first place. Kevin raised his eyebrows a little and asked her curiously, "Why does he suddenly want me to go back? Did something bad happen?" "It sounds like you're out of the loop. The Alliance sent an army led by the Sergeant-at-Arms King to attack the Central Alternative Healing Academy's headquarters a few days ago. However, with the other major schools sending in reinforcements, we've suffered heavy losses, and the Alliance's remaining forces now face a dilemma." Shannon roughly explained the situation. "But how does that have anything to do with me?" Kevin's heart was filled with doubt. "The Alliance leader is planning to send reinforcements, and he wants you to go to be on the front lines to help the Sergeant-at-Arms King preside over the situation. On top of that, in order to ensure victory, you must also conquer the entire Central Alternative Healing Academy." Shannon finally revealed the main reason behind their meeting. The Alliance leader wants me to lead the army? Who suggested this idea? Kevin's voice grew loud enough to wake the dead. In fact, he felt even worse when he realized how complicated things were getting. He still had to make a trip to the headquarters of the Myriads, because Brett Stewart had asked him to lead an army to attack the Union. How was he going to be in two places at once? Kevin couldn't really understand why an inexperienced newbie like him was entrusted by both leaders to lead their respective armies. Did the Alliance and the Myriads really have no one left? Messenger, there's no need to be surprised. With your abilities, I believe that you're truly worthy of being called a great leader. And you'll definitely be able to lead an army to conquer all of our enemies. And while you may still be young, this battle will give you an opportunity to gain experience and make enormous contributions to the Alliance. In the future, your name will surely be spread across the world. Shannon seemed to be exaggerating things a bit as she tried her best to flatter Kevin. I think you're overhyping my capabilities a little, Kevin replied with a fake smile. That being said, I'm afraid I can't go back to the Alliance's headquarters right now. The Alliance director previously gave me a very important mission that hasn't been settled yet. With the next semester coming up, I still need to serve the Alliance as a spy in the Healing Arts School. If I left the school without notice, I'm afraid that I would attract Wayne Ford's suspicion. And if that were to happen, all of my previous efforts will be in vain. You're right. Shannon clearly forgot about this before coming here, and at the moment she was caught in a dilemma herself. After all, she was the one who suggested Kevin to the Alliance leader in the first place. Go back and tell the Alliance leader that he needs to choose another talented person. I'm sure there are countless other capable and deserving candidates in the Alliance. Once I've completed my mission for the Alliance director, I'll definitely report back to the headquarters. Kevin lightly wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Yes, Messenger. Shannon slowly raised her head to look at Kevin. I do have one request, though. Once everything has been sorted out, I want to stay by your side to serve you. Kevin almost fainted on the spot when he heard her request. The next morning, after Kevin made breakfast for Lily, he received a message from Mitchell Cook, asking him to come quickly to the hospital to check on Drake Cook's condition. Ever since Drake had been hospitalized, it seemed that his injuries wouldn't heal no matter what. Running out of solutions, even the hospital could only temporarily stabilize his condition. When he arrived at the hospital's intensive care unit ward, Kevin looked through the glass at Drake, who was lying unconscious in his bed, surrounded by all sorts of monitors and tubes. What exactly happened to Drake? Why are his injuries so severe? Kevin wondered. During his meeting with Shannon Tate, the head of the administrators, Kevin managed to get out of returning to the Alliance's headquarters to lead their army against the grade schools by explaining that he still had to complete his mission for the director as a spy of the Healing Arts School. The next morning, Kevin had just made Lily some breakfast when Mitchell Cook called, urgently asking him to come to the hospital for his son, who remained unconscious and wouldn't recover. Upon arriving at the hospital's intensive care unit and seeing Drake Cook, Kevin wondered what exactly had happened to him for him to be unable to recover from his injuries.
He was injured by a couple of mysterious people. We don't know where they came from, but Drake is actually pretty lucky to be alive. His assistants were all killed on the spot, Mitchell Cook explained quietly. I've been investigating the matter ever since then. However, it seems that those 5 men were extremely skilled experts. After injuring Drake, they disappeared and never showed themselves in Chicago again, so it would be very difficult to find them.
Did you say that 5 men attacked him together? Kevin frowned even more. He instantly thought of a possible culprit in this attack.
Anyway, the doctor said that Drake's condition can only be cured by a powerful medicinal pill. I've already sent people to search for one everywhere, and no matter how high the price is, I won't give up.
Mitchell Cook's tone was very firm. Although he was usually very tough and strict towards Drake, deep in his heart he still cared very much about his adopted son, despite his many shortcomings and failures. Just then, Kevin took out a reddish-brown pill and offered it to Mitch. "Give this rapid recovery pill to him. As for the people who attacked him, you must continue to investigate. Inform me immediately if there's any news about who they were or who sent them." This time, Kevin was really angry. He vowed to himself that anyone who dared to harm his people in Chicago, no matter who it was, wouldn't be able to leave the city again in one piece. 10 minutes later, Kevin was walking out of the hospital along with Mitchell Cook and his bodyguards when he noticed an old man on the street. "You guys go and do whatever you need to. I'll just wander around the area for a while." Kevin gently waved his hand and ordered them to leave him. Mitchell Cook took a look at the old man and nodded back at Kevin. He and his people then got into several black luxury cars and left one after the other in a convoy. Taking a deep breath, Kevin walked up to the old man unhurriedly. "Dean Ford, what are you doing here on such a fine day?" Apart from the dean of the Healing Arts School, who else could this old man be?
"Kevin, it seems that you're a very busy man these days. You don't seem to have the time to pay us a visit or even call."
Wayne Ford took a good look at Kevin. There was some surprise in the depths of his eyes, but he hid it well enough to not get discovered. "The upcoming semester hasn't started yet. Why should I be in a hurry to go back? Do you and Vice President Shepard already miss me?" Kevin asked with a smile.
"The weather's pretty good today. Why don't you come and walk around with me for a bit?"
Wayne didn't wait for Kevin to agree before he turned around and started walking. Kevin simply shrugged his shoulders and followed after him. Now that the dean had found him, he didn't think he could escape from him anyway. As they walked along the street, Wayne suddenly asked,
"Did you let Roger Knott go?"
Kevin looked at him out of the corner of his eye and replied, "If you already know the answer, then why are you still asking me?"
"Knowing what you did is one thing, but finding out the reason why is another."
Wayne seemed to answer casually, but he was really curious to hear what Kevin had to say. However, Kevin didn't answer in a hurry and just continued to walk along with him. And as the two of them walked together, they didn't attract much attention. They simply looked like a grandfather and his grandson taking a peaceful stroll. After about half an hour, Wayne asked him again,
"Aren't you going to answer my question?"
"Saving a person's life comes as easy for me as breathing. There are some things that don't need to have a deep reason." Kevin placed his hands in his pockets, unconcerned about Wayne thought of what he'd done. If anyone from the great power saw Kevin treating Wayne Ford like this, they'd be so shocked that their jaws would drop. After all, he was currently the most prominent figure amongst all of the trained experts. Even if Jeffrey Bowie and the leaders of the other top schools were standing in front of him, they'd still have to treat him with respect or risk feeling his wraths, like what happened with the Union's Renee Silver and Vivian Myers.
"Your explanation is too crude and vague. Let me ask you more directly. Were you able to obtain the secret of consolidation from Roger Knott?"
Wayne Ford immediately added,
"No need to be hesitant or avoid answering my question. I already know that you're quite interested in it, but rest assured it's the only question that I'll ask about it."
"If I told you that I wasn't able to get it, would you believe me?" Kevin didn't doubt the dean's words. Wayne paused for a moment, then told him,
"Whether I believe it or not doesn't really matter, but let me tell you something. Although you're probably aware that consolidation is an ancient technique, only those who truly understand it know that there are actually 10 parts to it, so there won't be many benefits for you if you're only able to discover one of them."
Wayne continued,
"In addition, I should remind you that a man who isn't guilty of stealing a treasure is still guilty of wanting it. In other words, although the consolidation technique is good on its own, there are also many others in the great powers who want to get their hands on it too. Moreover, while you may not have realized your full potential yet, a lot of organizations recognize that you're a special talent. Because of this, you should be careful who you trust and align yourself with. With many challenges ahead, the choices you make along the way will determine your future."
Wayne Ford's tone was very calm. but the meaning behind his words of wisdom had entered deep into Kevin's heart.
"The young woman who was with you in the forest last night has already left the city, hasn't she?"
Wayne suddenly asked. Kevin's eyes grew wide when he heard this, and he turned around and looked at Wayne Ford in disbelief. He thought that his whereabouts the night before had been kept secret. With no surveillance cameras around, how could Wayne Ford have known? It seemed that he had eyes everywhere, and if Shannon Tate's identity was exposed, it would be very difficult for Kevin to continue staying in Chicago because of his affiliation with the Alliance. "What exactly do you want to know?" Kevin stopped walking and stared into Wayne Ford's eyes.
"I'm just worried that you might get lost in the forest at night. After all, the path can be quite dangerous and scary, especially in the dark."
Wayne Ford smiled. Although he looked warm and kind on the outside, Kevin couldn't believe what he said. This old man was really something. But which side was Wade Ford truly on? Meanwhile, in the Salix Leaf complex, Lily had just finished her breakfast. She sat down on the sofa and took out her phone to look for a new job that would be suitable for her. Dorothy, who was walking down the stairs, asked in surprise, "Lily, why are you still at home? Why didn't Kevin take you to the Williams Company?" "Mom, I told you that I have no plans of working for the Williams Company. In fact, I'm already looking for a job right now." Lily pouted and replied unhappily, "What kind of job are you looking for then? Do you have to work for a small company under someone else instead of managing your own big company?" Dorothy's expression suddenly became sad. "Look at how many times Kevin has been away from the Williams Company. And in his absence, that huge company was left to someone else to manage. Given this, wouldn't it be better if he just let you manage it rather than handing over the responsibility to a person we don't know? Besides, what's the use of you working for thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars a month? It's not even enough for me to go out and play cards with my friends." Lily immediately stood up from the sofa when she heard this. She looked at her mother and took a deep breath. "Mom, didn't you promise not to go out and play cards anymore? Did you forget what happened the last time you were threatened by one of your so-called friends due to your gambling debt? They even asked you to pay up while you were visiting me at the hospital." "What are you so worried about? Our family's current situation can't be compared to before. Do you know how much money the Williams Company makes? Can Kevin spend that all by himself? I'm doing it for his sake." Dorothy defended herself righteously. "Let me teach you a lesson today. If you don't spend your money, what's the point in having it?" "Fine. Go out and gamble all you want. But I'm calling Kevin right now. No matter how much money in gambling debts you'll end up owing, I won't let him cover a single cent of it." Lily angrily snapped back. After talking to Wayne Ford for more than 20 minutes, Kevin suddenly remembered what he had previously promised Truman Anderson the night before. So he called a taxi to head over to the Anderson family's mansion. Truman was busy wiping a vase in the courtyard. "Kevin, you actually came. I thought you were just lying to me. If you didn't come today, I was ready to call you again. Something has to be done about Phoebe." After talking with Wayne Ford for a while, Kevin remembered that he'd promised Truman Anderson he'd stop by to talk with Phoebe and try to convince her to stop pining for him and get on with her life. He called for a ride to the Anderson family's mansion, and when he got there, he found Truman cleaning a vase in the courtyard. Phoebe's father was surprised to see Kevin, but quickly reminded him that he really had to have a serious conversation with Phoebe. Kevin scratched the back of his head and replied awkwardly, "I was just wandering around. I happened to pass by and I decided to come in and say hi." "All right. Since you're already here, come on in. Don't just stand there like a fool." Truman didn't look up at Kevin. He took a deep breath and gently wiped the vase a few times. "I'm only letting you in because of your feelings for Phoebe. It's normal for young people to like each other." Kevin raised his eyebrows slightly when he heard that. "You seem to know a lot, Truman." "I was once young myself, you know." Truman smiled and gestured at the luxurious room they were standing in. "This isn't the first time you've been to my home. Phoebe is in her room on the second floor. You can head up there yourself." Kevin looked at Truman for a moment as he thought about what he'd just said. He realized that Phoebe's father must have been quite romantic when he was a young man. But Kevin was very curious as to why he'd never heard of any of Truman's romantic affairs when he was a young businessman in Chicago. However, he didn't waste any more time thinking about it, and he headed for the stairs. When he got to the second floor, Kevin saw Phoebe holding his picture. Her eyes were filled with tears, and her face looked very worried, as if he was never coming back. "Kevin, where are you now? Do you know how much I miss you?" Phoebe was whispering as she sobbed uncontrollably. Kevin stood there in shocked silence as he heard Phoebe continue to lament. "When will I ever see you again? Are you upset by what happened to the Jones family?" He was touched by what she said next. "I really want to go on a vacation with you, just the two of us. Let's go to the seaside together to watch the sunrise and then to the mountains to watch the sunset." Kevin had always treated Phoebe like she was just a very good friend, but the time was never right to talk about their feelings. Later on, Phoebe didn't hesitate to marry into the Hayes family to get the rejuvenation pill and save his life. To be honest, Kevin was very touched by what she'd done for him. "I really want to see you now, Kevin. Everyone said that you're just a lowly son-in-law, so you must be very good at cooking, right? Well, when will you cook something for me?" Phoebe looked at Kevin's photo and seemed to be in a trance. Although what she'd said wasn't romantic and she was very down to earth, it was obvious that she had deep feelings in her heart for Kevin. Kevin finally had to break the silence. "If you want to eat, I'll cook something for you right away." Phoebe froze in her seat as Kevin's words sank in. It took a long moment before she slowly turned her head around. The photo slipped gently from her hand onto the floor. She blinked hard and rubbed her eyes. After making sure that she wasn't seeing things, she got very excited. Phoebe stood up and threw herself right into Kevin's arms. She hugged him tightly as if she was afraid that he would suddenly disappear again. "Why didn't you call me if you were so worried?" Kevin gently patted Phoebe's back. The two of them were so close to each other that he could feel her trembling intensely in his arms. He could even sense her heart beating against his chest. After a while, Kevin could feel Phoebe's tears dripping down his cheek. Finally, she slowly raised her head. Her eyes had become red and swollen. Why are you here?" Seeing Phoebe like this, Kevin felt an inexplicable pain in his heart. "Of course I came to see you. After all, I snatched you back from the Hayes family. I'd have to be heartless to ignore you after something like that." Kevin's reply reached deep into Phoebe's soul. She couldn't stop herself from bursting into tears again. At the Alliance headquarters, Shannon Tate was kneeling respectfully on the ground. The Alliance leader was standing by the window with his hands behind his back looking at the scenery outside. He was dressed all in black and he was emitting a deathly aura.
"Kevin really said that?"
The Alliance leader asked her incredulously. "Yes, sir. The messenger said he was carrying out the mission that the Night King gave him. If he left, all his previous efforts would be in vain." Shannon Tate lowered her head, not daring to look the Alliance leader directly in the eye.
"What are the Night King and Kevin doing right now?"
The Alliance leader asked worriedly. The Night King was the only person he respected in the entire Alliance, but at the same time, the Night King was also the person he feared the most. Now that Kevin had reappeared, an uneasy feeling suddenly arose in the Alliance leader's heart. After thinking for a long time, he made up his mind.
"Pass on my order and let the Sergeant-at-Arms King bring his men back."
Shannon Tate was stunned and didn't react right away to the Alliance leader's decision. She gathered her courage and asked, "Are you really going to call the Sergeant-at-Arms back here? Don't forget that the other administrators and I can also lead the troops at the headquarters and send more troops to the Central Alternative Healing Academy as soon as you give the order." Deep down inside, Shannon was filled with a desire to accomplish great things and make a difference.
"Forget it. Although you and the other administrators are powerful, it would still be quite difficult for you. to fight against the elites from all the major schools, including the Grand Empress. Unless we mobilize every single top member of the Alliance, I'll have to go there personally," he replied matter-of-factly. "Besides, I only want to test the strength of the 10 major schools in this attack on the Central Alternative Healing Academy. Our main goal is to conserve energy and prepare for the future."
The Alliance leader was very clear about his strategy. Although Shannon didn't understand what the Alliance leader was doing, she didn't dare to ask any questions, let alone argue with him. In the main hall of the Swinton family's mansion in St. Louis, Richard was sitting on a chair with a blank look on his face. His daughter Brenda and his wife Catherine Swinton were sitting to the left of him looking worried. Gail lowered her head and knelt on the floor, and her delicate body was trembling nonstop. "Father, please don't be angry. My little sister knows she made a mistake. Please let her get up." Brenda couldn't help but plead on her sister's behalf. "That's right, dear. After all, Gail is our biological daughter. You've already scolded and punished her. That should be the end of it." Catherine pleaded with him as she let out a heavy sigh.
"The two of you don't need to say anything else. The Thompson family has arranged for someone to come and pick her up later."
Richard waved his hand decisively to motion for them to stop talking. As soon as Richard finished speaking, the three of them all looked at him in disbelief. What was the Thompson family going to do? Everyone in St. Louis knew what was happening. It wouldn't be a good thing for them to pick up Gail right now. Catherine was the first to react. "Hubby, do you really want Gail to go to jail?"
"She gave Curtis Green the food he ate. Although she didn't do it on purpose, she could be considered an accomplice. I can't protect her from the law."
Richard's tone was very calm, as if he was just reading the newspaper. It was like he wasn't even talking about his own daughter. "No, Dad, I don't want to go to jail. I really know I screwed up. Can you please not hand me over to the Thompsons' men?" Gail was still kneeling on the floor and her knees were starting to hurt. She hugged her father's legs and begged him for mercy.
"Gail, you're an adult now. You should be held responsible for your actions,"
Richard answered as he patted her shoulder. Gail was really starting to panic now. She never thought that her own father would actually let her go to prison. If that happened, her life would be ruined. "Dad, you can't abandon your own daughter because of a country bumpkin like Kevin." Gail's tears fell like rain as she begged him for mercy. "Dad, please think about it." Brenda was also becoming flustered. "Honey, if Gail goes to jail, our family will never be able to show our faces in public again," Catherine said anxiously. "Are you really willing to sacrifice your daughter's life just for Kevin's future?" At the Swinton family mansion, Catherine and Brenda were pleading for Richard to change his mind about letting the Thompson family come to pick up Gail, so she could be taken to jail for her involvement in the Curtis Green poisoning. They couldn't believe he'd give up his own daughter just to save Kevin's future. Richard Swinton took a deep breath and turned his head to look at his wife. He appeared to be even more upset than before.
"What did you say?"
"Did I say something wrong? Kevin said he was only your foster son. Gail is our biological daughter, our own flesh and blood. Don't you know which of them is more important?" Catherine pulled Gail up from the floor and stood in front of her to protect her. "As long as I still have breath left in me, I want to see who has the guts to take my daughter away." With a loud bang, Richard Swinton's fist shattered the solid oak table next to him. The loud outburst shocked his family.
"You just don't get the point, do you?"
Richard slowly stood up and pointed at Gail as he asked them,
"How old is she? If you continue to spoil her like this, I think it won't be long before she ends up colluding with outsiders to do some real harm to our family." "You said that she's our daughter? Let me tell you something right now if you insist that she avoid taking responsibility for her actions. From this day forward, She will no longer be my daughter, and I'll expel her from the Swinton mansion. She'll be out of our lives forever, and I'll even have her erased from our family tree."
These cruel words struck at the hearts of his wife and daughters like a bolt of lightning. Everyone stared at Richard with their eyes wide open, not daring to believe what he'd said was true. "Richard, you aren't serious, are you?" Catherine's lips began to tremble uncontrollably. "Do you realize what you're saying?"
"I know what I'm talking about. If you and Brenda still want to protect her, I'll get someone else to kick her out of the house right this second,"
Richard declared resolutely and decisively. By his tone of voice, you could tell that there was no room for negotiation. Gail was completely dumbfounded by all of this. Her hands and feet were frozen in place and her eyes were filled with disbelief. She didn't understand how things had gotten to this point. Didn't her father love her the most ever since she was a young child? Didn't that mean anything to him? Why was he treating her like this for the sake of that hillbilly Kevin? And he even wanted to banish her from the Swinton family forever? At the Anderson family's mansion in Chicago, Phoebe was tightly hugging Kevin around the waist, and she was snuggling against him like a little kitten. Very softly, she purred to him. "Kevin, I love you so much. You know, I've already given this a lot of thought. Even if you don't want a divorce, Lily, I'll stay with you and be faithful to you. I can even be your lover if you'll have me. I'm not afraid of what others might say about me, and I don't care what anybody may say about you either. In my heart, you're the best man alive. No one compares to you." Phoebe slowly closed her eyes. Her entire body seemed like it was about to melt into Kevin's. His heart trembled when he heard her confession. "Phoebe, I'm just a regular guy. How can I accept your love? Do you know that everyone used to say you were just a useless son-in-law in the Jones family? When I first met you, I already could tell that you're a talented man." The more Phoebe spoke, the more her body trembled. Tears kept falling from her eyes. "Especially when we went camping that time and you had to face that cougar alone, regardless of the danger. You risked your life to buy me time to leave because I was injured." While Phoebe spoke to Kevin about her feelings, she looked so lovely that anyone would have taken pity on her. "Kevin, I was wondering what kind of man could do something like that. Actually, I didn't want to leave you in the woods, and there was a voice deep inside me telling me to stay. You risked your life to give me a chance to survive. Then I had to go down to the campsite and get someone to save you. By then, I was really afraid that you'd already been killed by that horrible beast." Kevin held Phoebe's hand tightly and rubbed his cheek on her forehead. "What would have happened if I died?" Kevin asked with a smile. Before Phoebe could answer, their bodies started to shake. Actually, the bed they were lying on and the entire mansion were shaking too. "Phoebe, we're having an earthquake!" Truman anxiously shouted up to them from the backyard. "An earthquake? What's going on?" It was the first time Phoebe had experienced something like this. Kevin took Phoebe by the waist and quickly jumped out the window with her. She let out a cry of surprise as they landed steadily on the ground. By now, the earthquake had already ended. It seemed that it hadn't been a very powerful one, so it didn't cause a lot of damage. This could happen now and then in the Midwest. "Are you all right, Phoebe?" Truman rushed over to them excitedly. After pushing Kevin aside, he took a good look at his daughter to make sure she hadn't been injured. "Kevin, what were you thinking? Why did you jump out the window? What if you had hurt Phoebe?" Truman glared at Kevin as he criticized his decision. "Don't worry, Truman. Most people would have taken cover under a table or something, but I knew that it was even safer out in the yard. Not everyone would be powerful enough to do what I did, though." Kevin suddenly stopped talking as his gaze fell on Phoebe. "Besides, do you think I could ever let something happen to Phoebe?" When Phoebe heard Kevin say this, she immediately blushed and smiled a little. Suddenly, Kevin's phone rang. It was definitely bad timing for Lily to be giving Kevin a call. "Hello, honey. Where are you? You didn't get hurt in that earthquake, did you?" Lily anxiously asked as soon as the call connected. "I didn't feel much of anything. Are you all right?" Kevin looked at Phoebe, then he turned around and walked away so he could speak more freely. "I'm fine, but can you come back home? I'm a little scared to be all alone," Lily said sweetly. Okay, I'll be right there. Kevin let out a sigh and hung up the phone. After putting his phone back in his pocket, Kevin said a few more words to Phoebe. The two of them looked deeply into each other's eyes and completely ignored Truman. At the same time, in the director's office of the Healing Arts School, Wayne Ford's face showed his disappointment. But no one knew exactly what Harley Shepard was thinking as he poured himself another cup of coffee. Harley finally came back to his senses and quickly put down the coffee pot. That was no ordinary earthquake. I could clearly feel a very strong energy fluctuation in it.
There's a more important thing to worry about right now. That energy came from the lake.
Wayne Ford closed his eyes to rest them as he gently rubbed his temples.
Do you think the Pinnacle did this?
We don't have any confirmation yet, but Harley Shepard had just finished speaking when the office door was flung open. An old man covered in blood stumbled in, choking, and fell to the floor. The two of them quickly jumped up and went over to help the man. What's happened to you? Shepard asked him with great concern. He carefully helped the man to the sofa so he could lie down. The Pinnacle is coming, the man stammered in a weak voice. The more he breathed, the less air he seemed to get. He looked as if he was about to die any second. Shepard quickly reached out his hand and placed it on the old man's shoulder. Then he elevated his feet while he grabbed his first aid kit to stabilize his condition.
What did you just say?
Wayne Ford's eyes grew wide.
Did the Pinnacle finally decide to attack after all these years? How is this possible?
With the help of Harley Shepard's first aid skills, the man was obviously feeling much better than before. After a while, he'd regained enough strength to speak and explain to them. The Pinnacle has started mobilizing their forces, and they're on their way. Right after the earthquake, Wayne Ford and Harley Shepard were trying to calm their nerves as they sat in the dean's office at the Healing Arts School. Suddenly, an old man came in with the news that the Pinnacle had made their move and they were on their way. He was badly injured, but Shepard used his skills to help stabilize him enough to be able to speak.
What about the others?
Wayne Ford asked anxiously. He knew that the Pinnacle had been in hiding far away from the continental U.S. for a very long time. They had set up on a large island in the Atlantic. No, it wasn't the lost continent of Atlantis, but it was large enough to support a very large population. And they had advanced technologies and scientific knowledge to keep themselves invisible to the rest of the world. The 10 grade schools kept an eye on the region even though they'd never been able to find the Pinnacle's exact location. They were so worried about the Pinnacle's return that a special group had been set up to keep watch and prevent them from ever reaching the continent. These experts were known as the Foundation Advance Team. Each of its members could be considered a top expert in the Foundation, which was really just a name that referred to anyone who opposed the Pinnacle. Pretty much the entire rest of the world. So all the schools, even if they had some petty squabbles against each other, were still on the same side when it came to protecting the planet from the Pinnacle. If all of the Foundation Advance Team members were killed by the Pinnacle, it would undoubtedly be the greatest loss humanity had ever suffered. They're still fighting intensely with the first wave of the Pinnacle. I was ordered to come back and tell you the news, and gather all the schools together so we can prepare. After saying this, the elderly man slowly closed his eyes. Harley Shepard and Wayne Ford looked at each other. They could see the anxiety in each other's eyes. The Pinnacle was coming far sooner than they'd expected. In the Myriad's headquarters on Herring Island, Brett Stewart had gathered together all the higher-ups in the main hall to discuss some important matters. Since they were located off the East Coast, they knew before anyone else what the Pinnacle had been up to. The earthquake had shaken not only the Midwest, but had been felt off the coast too, hundreds of miles away. There was some visible damage to many of their buildings on the island. And unlike the Pinnacle's island, theirs was visible to anyone and everyone, friend or foe. I'm sure all of you know the reason why I called all of you here. Brett Stewart was sitting in the Supreme Commander's place of honor at the meeting. He glanced around the hall and continued. Now I want to hear if any of you have some useful suggestions. As soon as he said that, the entire hall was filled with noise. All the senior members of the Myriad started whispering to each other. "The Pinnacle's aggressive approach won't be easy to deal with," one of them said anxiously. Another one swore. "We'll die before we surrender. We have to fight the Pinnacle with real weapons and let them know that we can't be defeated so easily." But a lot of them were afraid that they would be no match for an enemy like the Pinnacle. The expression on Brett Stewart's face became more and more disillusioned as the discussions continued. Milton Brown, who was standing at the front of the group, walked up to Brett Stewart and spoke to him in a loud voice so everyone in the Great Hall could hear him. "The Pinnacle is forcing your hand with this all-out assault. I think it's better to temporarily give up on our headquarters and move to a place that would be safer from this kind of attack. After all, we have a lot of branches throughout the country that would be a lot easier to defend." As soon as he finished speaking, many people agreed with his opinion and echoed his concerns. They figured they could return to the island later after the conflict with the Pinnacle was over. The problem was they couldn't figure out which branch of the Myriads was large enough to accommodate all of them. Brett Stewart narrowed his eyes. In fact, Milton saw the situation exactly as he did. He'd already planned to give up the headquarters, but he was too embarrassed to say it in front of the entire upper echelon of the Myriads. "Milton is right. Do you have a definite place in mind where we could go?" Brett Stewart asked him carefully. "There are more than 50,000 people in our headquarters right now. We have to split up, but we can't give the other schools a chance to turn this against us." The room quieted down after they heard what Brett Stewart had just said. They knew he was right. They had to be careful because the relocation of their headquarters wouldn't be easy. "Don't worry, Supreme Commander. I've already thought of a plan. Chicago, New York City, and Detroit. We have branches in these 3 places, and a few of the most prominent families there have already joined us. It won't be a problem for us to split up and focus our efforts on those 3 cities," Milton explained. "The personnel in the headquarters will be divided into 3 groups, and they can also coordinate with each other in case they meet with any attacks from the other schools. That way, we'll be able to provide support as soon as possible." Milton Brown was indeed an old fox. In such a short period of time, he'd already planned everything out very thoroughly. "Everyone, listen up. We have 3 hours to put this plan into action. Everyone needs to pack up all essential equipment and follow Milton's instructions. Go to your designated location immediately." Brett Stewart waved his hand to signal for everyone to leave. In a luxurious courtyard in Washington, D.C., an elderly man was staring out at the horizon. The glint in his eyes made him look a bit younger than his actual age. "We've received news that the Pinnacle has begun its assault," a middle-aged man who was standing behind him reported respectfully. "The people below are asking if they should begin taking action so that they can have a plan in place." "Don't worry. Didn't the people of Healing Art School and the rest of the major schools already know about this? Let them go and play with the Pinnacle first. It's not too late for us to make preparations, but we need to evaluate the situation first." The man's tone was calm, like he wasn't worried at all about the Pinnacle's invasion. "If we wait too long, it might increase the number of casualties, especially along the coast. The civilians will definitely—" The old man interrupted him and said, "We don't need to worry about unimportant details like that. The lives of some ordinary people don't concern us. Right now, I'm wondering where the Morris family is. We should call them back here in case they're needed. Otherwise, it would be hard to explain the situation to our directors." "Yes, sir." The middle-aged man nodded respectfully before he disappeared in a flash. When he was gone, the elderly man let out a long sigh, shook his head, and said to himself, "We're counting on you to bring back the power pill formula. The Pinnacle has already made its first move in its attack. There really isn't much time left for us." After comforting Lily, Kevin walked over to the window and looked at the sun on the horizon. His heart was heavy because he had a bad premonition. He didn't know why, but when the earthquake happened, he began to panic. He even gasped for air, as if something monumental had just happened. "You felt it?" He could hear a quiet voice behind him. Kevin turned his head around and saw the Night King, who had been gone for a very long time. "I should have known my mentor would arrive just when I needed him most," Kevin called out as he nodded his head respectfully. He would never have the nerve to ask why the Night King had appeared in his home. Although Kevin didn't know the exact strength level the man had reached, he could vaguely guess it. He was definitely sure that no one in the world could stop the Night King even if they wanted. The Night King looked into his eyes and asked, "What did you just sense? Tell me everything, no matter how insignificant it seems." "I don't know why, but I'm unusually nervous. It seems that something strange has happened and affected my nerves, making me feel extremely uneasy." Kevin told him the truth. The Night King nodded. He looked relieved to hear Kevin's reply. "It seems that your spiritual energy is increasing very quickly," the Night King explained to him. "To tell you the truth, the Pinnacle is fighting to get past the Foundation Advance Team, which means they've begun their assault." Kevin's eyes immediately widened in surprise. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak. He knew that this would eventually happen, but he just didn't think that it would be so soon. The Night King tried to reassure Kevin. "You don't need to be so shocked and nervous. They haven't gotten completely past them, so most of the Pinnacle is still far away from here." Then very seriously he told Kevin what to expect. "If my calculations are correct, and they usually are, the Pinnacle will send their vanguard troops here in less than 10 days. When that happens, Chicago and Detroit will become the main battlefield. The members of the 10 major schools should have started to mobilize by now. In order to prevent ordinary citizens from suffering heavy casualties, they need to make special arrangements. Their only choice is to make sure that the fighting takes place out on the water, on the Great Lakes, and off the East Coast. So if you want to leave with your family, you must hurry now." Kevin was feeling really uneasy about the earthquake, like something terrible was about to happen. As he was looking out the window, the Night King appeared in his apartment and explained to him that the Pinnacle was fighting to break away from their hidden island in the Atlantic and launch an assault on Chicago and Detroit. He believed that they would arrive within the next 10 days. Kevin opened his mouth to speak, but in the end he couldn't say anything. Although he wasn't the type of person who cared about everyday things, he was still a part of the Foundation, and he wanted to make sure that he could help save the world from the Pinnacle. But what about Lily? And Phoebe's life was in danger too. Could Kevin really ignore the two of them? And didn't his parents care about all this too? Even if Kevin escaped, where could he run to? If the major schools and righteous groups failed to defeat the Pinnacle, would they still have a future? Just as Kevin was pondering these questions, his phone suddenly rang. He looked at the caller ID and saw that it was Brett Stewart calling him back. After a brief moment of hesitation, Kevin answered the phone. "Hi, Brett." "Kevin, something big has happened. The Pinnacle is fighting to get past the Foundation Advance Team and attack us. You don't have to return to headquarters, though. I've decided to temporarily abandon our headquarters and move everyone to Chicago, Detroit, and New York. I'll fill you in on the rest of the details later when I get to Chicago." Brett Stewart seemed to be very busy with other preparations, and he hung up the phone right away. However, Kevin had mixed feelings about the news. The Myriads were coming to New York in the Midwest? Then what would happen to the Radiants? Besides, Spencer and the others were originally from the Myriads. If anyone from the Myriads figured out what Kevin had done, would his entire organization be threatened? The Night King stared at Kevin and put things in perspective for him. "There are some issues that you don't have to worry about right now. Do you know what's the most important thing at the moment?" "To be honest, I don't know what else to do," Kevin admitted as he walked the Night King to his study. "I'm just a simple man. I have no idea what the Pinnacle even looks like. Besides, there are so many schools in the underground and the government. The Morris family, the Reaper Squad, and the Herbalist Society will surely take measures to defend against them." Kevin looked off into the distance and shared his innermost thoughts with the Night King. With so many powerful people attacking, even if the world is on the brink of collapse, there will still be someone around to defend it. "I don't understand why you're asking me what I should do. I'm just one man." The Night King wasn't in a hurry to answer his question. The two of them stood there for a long time in silence. "There are some things that you can't do without knowing how. There are also some things that can't be explained by reason," the Night King said very enigmatically. Then he turned to Kevin and said calmly,
Since you established the Radiance, it's clear that you have greater plans. You've already achieved the first step by going to St. Louis. Don't tell me you don't have a plan for the second or the third step."
The Night King gently patted Kevin on the shoulder.
"If you insist on having a reason, all I can tell you is that your family and friends' lives are at stake. This is something you should take into consideration."
He paused for a moment and added,
"Kevin, you know deep down inside what you want. It's just that you're hesitating to listen to your gut and take your next step."
When the Night King finished speaking, Kevin was at a loss for words. Ever since he knew about the Pinnacle, Kevin had already started to formulate a long-range plan. Unfortunately, the Pinnacle made its move too quickly. His plan simply couldn't keep up with all the changes. There simply wasn't enough time. In the main hall of the Swinton family mansion in St. Louis, Catherine Swinton was holding her younger daughter's hand tightly, as if she was afraid that she would never see her again. Brenda looked at her little sister and sighed, but Richard Swinton just stared out the door with a blank look on his face. Not long afterward, they heard someone hurry into the room. Gail Swinton was like a frightened child, and her entire body began to tremble as her face turned extremely pale. Joseph Thompson walked in, and his gaze immediately fell on Gail.
"You're late."
Richard Swinton narrowed his eyes and complained. He'd agreed to meet with Joseph Thompson an hour earlier. The two men had known each other for many years, and Richard Swinton knew exactly how dependable Joseph Thompson usually was.
"I don't have time to explain anything to you. You have to go with me immediately,"
Joseph said anxiously. "No, I won't allow this. You can't take my daughter away." Catherine Swinton spread her arms wide and stood in front of Gail to protect her. Then she pleaded, "Joseph, please don't take Gail. I'll make sure she's punished for her foolishness. But Curtis Green's death has nothing to do with Gail. She was just being used." Richard Swinton sighed and closed his eyes tightly. He didn't want to see his daughter being taken away either.
"Mrs. Swinton, you didn't hear what I said. I asked Richard to come with me, but I didn't say anything about taking Gail away."
Joseph replied with a confused look on his face. Richard opened his eyes as soon as he heard that. Catherine and her two daughters were all stunned too.
"I didn't have time to inform you that the cause of Curtis Green's death has been determined. It had nothing to do with Gail at all."
Joseph didn't seem to want to waste any more time.
"So Richard, what the hell are you waiting for? Hurry up and come with me. Something huge has just happened." "Oh, okay. Then let's go."
Richard Swinton tried to recover from his surprise. He followed Joseph out the door and left in a daze. Catherine and her daughter were silent for a few seconds. Gail let out an excited shout. She felt lucky to have survived the disaster. Time passed by slowly. The news of the Pinnacle's impending invasion had spread across the entire upper echelons of the government. In a short period of time, all the armed forces had been mobilized. At the same time, the large multinational corporations in Chicago had used various channels to transfer their own funds and industries to safety. While Lily and Dorothy were sleeping soundly, Kevin took advantage of the darkness and quickly left the apartment. After running at full speed for almost an hour, he arrived at the Radiance headquarters. He couldn't risk having anyone recognize one of his fancy sports cars. Spencer had already been waiting for him at the entrance for a long time.
"Mr. Williams,"
Spencer called out to him. He was very relieved that Kevin was finally there. "There's no need for any formalities. First, tell me about the situation. Is Dalton still here?" Kevin asked worriedly.
"Yes, Mr. Steele is still here. He's recovered quite quickly. Plus, we recently recruited another 10,000 members. Roger Knott from the Myriads and Nadia Alexander from the Herbalist Society's Midwest branch are waiting for you inside."
Spencer followed behind Kevin as they made their way into the building. Then Kevin gestured for Spencer to walk in front of him and lead him to where Dalton was staying. It wasn't very late, so Kevin figured that Dalton wouldn't be asleep yet. Dalton was still in the infirmary. Ever since he'd recovered from his injuries, he started training and taking all the herbal supplements he could get his hands on. With the help of the spiritual energy that Travis Adams had transferred to him, he'd reached the advanced steps of level 5. "Hubby, you're really perspiring." Miranda used a towel to wipe the sweat off Dalton's forehead.
"You've done so much for me lately, honey,"
Dalton said to her with a smile. "It was really nothing, dear. The Radiance has had people waiting on us hand and foot. If I weren't helping you, I'd be bored to death," Miranda said jokingly. Kevin pushed the door open and walked into the room with a big smile on his face. "Miranda, why don't you let Dalton wipe his own sweaty forehead?"
"Kevin, you're finally back."
Dalton jumped up from the hospital bed. The two brothers hadn't seen each other in a very long time, and they gave each other a big bear hug. They had a lot of news to catch up on. Kevin left Lily and Dorothy at the apartment and ran off into the night to get to the Radiance headquarters. When he arrived, Spencer led him up to the room where Dalton had been recovering from his injuries. Kevin and Dalton hadn't seen each other in a really long time, and they gave each other a huge bear hug as soon as Kevin walked into the room.
"Kevin, what have you been up to? Why did you only come back to see me now?"
Dalton punched Kevin's chest playfully. "I just had a few minor things to take care of. But aren't you full of energy? What else do I have to worry about?" Kevin said with a laugh. In fact, ever since Dalton had been rescued from the Williams family, Kevin wasn't worried about his injuries at all. As long as Dalton's head and heart were okay, he'd be able to recover all by himself no matter how serious his injuries were.
"By the way, Kevin, I heard about the Jones family. I hope you're not too sad about it. To be honest, Grandma Jones and the others never treated you very well. They're no big loss."
Dalton Steele put his arm around Kevin's shoulder and comforted him. "You shouldn't say that. After all, the dead can't speak for themselves. Even though I'm not sad because of what happened to them, they were still Lily's family," Kevin replied very casually. Then the two brothers sat on the sofa and chatted for a long time. "Do you want to go to another city now?" Kevin suddenly asked him. In the upcoming battle, the Pinnacle would definitely cause a lot of damage in Chicago. Kevin had already started to make plans to help Dalton since his family had already suffered so many losses.
"Brother, I won't hide anything from you. I've thought about this a lot already. My family has suffered a lot lately, and my grandfather has seen all his properties in Chicago disappear. If I leave now, I'll definitely hurt his feelings," Dalton said in a low voice.
"You're also at level 5 now. Even if you go to another city to start over all by yourself, nothing will stand in your way. Listen to me and think about it carefully." Kevin wanted to say something else but stopped himself.
"Has something happened in Chicago? Why do I feel like I should get out of town after hearing what you said?"
Dalton finally realized that something wasn't right. Kevin patted his shoulder, and Dalton could see in his eyes how conflicted Kevin was. "Actually, it wouldn't be good for you to know too much about it right now."
"What happened?"
Dalton was getting angry, and Kevin could tell that he wanted to break something. "I can tell you, but you have to be prepared," he replied. Then Kevin looked him in the eye and said, "I believe you learned about the Pinnacle from Travis Adams' will." Kevin paused for a moment to see if Dalton was following him. "The Pinnacle is preparing an attack and even set off an underwater explosion over a fault line in Lake Michigan. That was the earthquake you felt earlier today. They're still not on the continent yet, but they're already struggling to get the Foundation's assault team out of the way so they can send their forces for a final conflict. Chicago will be the first city to be affected. For your safety and your families, you should listen to me and leave Chicago as soon as possible." As Kevin stopped talking, the room fell into silence. Miranda bit her lip tightly and didn't make any sound, but her eyes showed how shocked she was by this news. Dalton took a deep breath and then slowly exhaled. It took him a long time to calm himself down.
"Kevin, are you going to leave town?"
The smile on Dalton's face had completely disappeared and was replaced by a melancholy look. "I won't leave," Kevin explained to his friend. "I'm not only a member of the Myriads, but also a senior member of the Radiance. With these obligations, there's no way I can leave." There was another important reason that he didn't share with Dalton. The Night King had discussed many things with him, and Kevin had already decided to stay in Chicago and use this war to develop and increase his strength. There would definitely be casualties if the war took place. Because of that, herbal pills were going to be even more important than usual. Why shouldn't Kevin benefit from the situation?
Kevin, what makes you think I'll leave?
Dalton said firmly.
If I have to, I'll build my own organization,
Dalton announced enthusiastically.
I'm sure I could recruit some people with a strength of at least level 5. Then you could get me some herbal pills or something. I'll be able to gather together a pretty strong force in no time.
Kevin narrowed his eyes. He wanted to say something, but he didn't know exactly how to put it. When the two brothers stopped talking, the door of the room was suddenly flung open. They looked up and saw Spencer.
Mr. Williams, Nadia Alexander and Roger Knott are waiting for you. Which one did you want to meet first?
Spencer asked him respectfully. Kevin wouldn't be able to spend much time at the Radiant's headquarters during this visit, so there were a lot of things that he needed to handle as soon as possible. I'll be right there. Kevin patted his friend on the shoulder again. Dalton, I'll come back and talk with you later. The meeting room at the Healing Arts School was brightly lit. The leaders from all the major schools had gathered together for an important meeting. Even the Union had come in spite of their conflict with the Healing Arts School. The Pinnacle was the enemy of just about everyone in the civilized world. It didn't matter which school or organization you were aligned with. They were a threat to everyone, both in the Foundation and regular citizens. If the major schools wanted to be victorious, they had to unite with each other and cooperate. Otherwise, they had no chance at all of winning.
Why didn't Wayne Ford send for the people from the Herbalist Society? No one from the Radiants has come to participate in the meeting either. Didn't you inform them?
One of the deans asked.
This isn't the time to throw a tantrum.
We're in urgent need of medicinal pills, especially power pills, now that war is imminent.
Another one responded. Then one of the other leaders complained.
Herbal pills are our most basic necessity. If we can't get access to enough of them, how can we minimize our casualties?
Some of them were wondering if the Radiants in the Herbalist Society hadn't shown up because they felt that the schools were beneath them. With so many powerful leaders voicing their opinions, the meeting started to get out of control. Listening to all the noise, Harley Shepard started to look worried. Is this how honorable people have a rational discussion? They sounded like a bunch of thugs quarreling and cursing in the street. Wayne Ford lightly rapped his knuckles on the table. The booming sound caused everyone to stop talking and turn to listen to him.
I asked you to come here tonight to discuss the fight against the Pinnacle, not to talk about the Herbalist Society and the Radiants.
Wayne Ford's tone of voice was very stern. Some of the weaker people in the room began to feel a little lightheaded because Wayne Ford was projecting so much energy at them. But one of the older, more respected school leaders spoke first.
Sir, it's not that we don't want to talk about the fight with the Pinnacle, but without a guarantee that we'll have access to herbal meds, what will we be able to do if any of our people are injured?
They were all wondering how they could fight for justice but still not send any of their people blindly into battle, risking preventable deaths. They knew what they were up against with formidable foes like the Pinnacle, especially their top people.
Quiet!
Wayne Ford shouted with a stern face. His voice echoed throughout the meeting room. Everyone immediately quieted down. No one wanted to challenge someone as powerful as Wayne. And who wanted to risk finding themselves in the same position as the Union? Then Wayne reassured them.
Of course, I'll go back and try to contact the Radiants and the Herbalist Society again. However, the most urgent matter right now is to ask everyone to send all the elite members of their organizations to Chicago to take care of the preparations. The Healing Arts School has already gathered all of our resources, including the people from our main headquarters. After that, all operations in this war will be under our command. Do any of you have objections to this?
Wayne Ford informed them harshly as his eye swept across the entire room. Soon, everyone began to talk noisily with each other as they reacted to Wayne Ford's announcement. A lot of them appreciated how forcefully he'd spoken, but they were afraid that one of the evil organizations would take advantage of the situation to make a sneak attack on one of the major schools. They wanted a chance to think things over and make sure that this was the best approach. One of them questioned the urgency of the situation.
The Pinnacle isn't even here yet. They're still far away right now. Aren't you worrying about nothing?
More and more of the leaders in the room began to voice their opposition to the plan. Harley Shepard and Wayne Ford looked at each other in exasperation. Wayne Ford and Harley Shepard had called the leaders of the major schools to the Healing Arts School for a meeting to discuss preparations for the imminent war with the Pinnacle. Ford planned for the Healing Arts School to take the lead in the coordination of their defense, but a lot of the school leaders didn't believe that there was enough of a threat yet. They began arguing and questioning the plan at a time when Wayne and Harley wanted everyone to unite so they could defend themselves and the entire country against the invasion. Harley sighed when he saw this reaction from the people in the room. The most important thing in the war against the Pinnacle was to unite everyone. They had just gathered together for that purpose, but their hearts and minds were completely divided. With his keen foresight, he could naturally see that the outcome of the war had already been decided. In the main hall of the Thompson family mansion in St. Louis, all the most important people of the city were assembled. Each of them was immensely important to the entire region, and their influence reached throughout the Midwest, if not further. Herman Thompson was sitting quietly in the head chair. He was looking down and seemed to be just resting with his eyes closed. Joseph Thompson was the first to speak to the crowd.
I believe that you have all found out the main reason why I summoned you here this evening. Although St. Louis isn't quite as large a city as Chicago, it's the first place where I came into contact with the Pinnacle. However, we're positioned to be the last stronghold of the entire Midwest. He paused for a moment to let that sink in. If St. Louis is broken, the Pinnacle will be able to enter the country's heartland almost completely unopposed. We've been given a mission whether we like it or not, even though the war has not yet begun. There is only one goal for us to focus on in our great city, and that is to defend the entire nation. One of the community leaders decided to show their support.
Mr. Thompson, there's no need for you to say anything more. As long as you give the order, we'll definitely listen to you.
The other people in the room nodded in agreement. They knew that the arrival of the Pinnacle was a threat to all of them. From the back of the room, someone shouted,
We aren't trained warriors, but we can still get our hands on the resources that we'll need. Every one of us will contribute something to fight back against the Pinnacle.
Then someone in the front row asked, If you've called us all here so urgently, does that mean you've been working on a plan? Richard Swinton looked at the richly dressed luminaries in the room. He was starting to feel a lot less discouraged, and now he had a little more hope for the outcome of the upcoming fight. Joseph Thompson explained the plan that they've come up with so far.
Actually, what I mean to say is very simple. St. Louis doesn't have a major school or underground organization, just a lot of business people. I don't think anybody would argue with that fact. Even though some of us have been training and working with herbal meds for a long time, we've never been considered a major force. So I plan to assemble all the most powerful people from each family together. Then we'll join the Radiants and set up 2 defensive lines to protect the city. Our success won't depend on a single person. That would be unrealistic. But as long as we unite, I believe that we can defeat the Pinnacle.
Joseph looked each of the people in the eye before he continued in a very calm but stern tone of voice.
Otherwise, if we lose this battle, our children will suffer the consequences of our failure. I don't think anybody wants to witness an outcome like that.
The dignitaries all began whispering to each other. A distinguished-looking woman in the front row was the first to offer help. Mr. Thompson has a point. I have a pharmaceutical company that stored a lot of herbal ingredients, and I heard that there's a talented herbalist in the Radiants. I'm willing to let them have all of my stocks. Another one promised to contribute to the effort.
Our family has 100 people who have been training in the martial arts and developing their strength. Although their power base isn't very high, they're very brave and would gladly risk their lives to protect the country.
The atmosphere in the room suddenly changed. Everyone began to show their fighting spirit.
They would rather die than let the Pinnacle get an easy victory. They also knew that if they lost the battle, none of their lives would be spared. Joseph Thompson replied in a serious tone, "Since everyone has agreed unanimously to resist the Pinnacle, I'll contact the Radiants as soon as possible and work out the rest of the details of our plan." Kevin, who was in the Radiant's headquarters at the time, didn't know about this meeting. His foster father and Joseph Thompson had once again placed a heavy burden on his shoulders. Nadia Alexander, who was sitting opposite Kevin, was looking down slightly. She was feeling very nervous for some reason and was gripping the armrest so tightly that her knuckles were turning white. Nadia wasn't used to being in a situation where she didn't know what to do, but she just couldn't shake off her anxiety. She was usually very proud of her skills in herbalism, but compared to someone like Kevin, her accomplishments were insignificant. "Nadia, I know you've been waiting here for a long time to see me. Don't tell me you came here for just one meeting," Kevin asked with a smile. Of course not." Nadia hesitated for a long time, and that was all she could manage to say. She felt uncharacteristically awkward. Kevin raised his eyebrows and asked her, "Then why did you come to see me? Have you had time to think about my offer?" "Yes, I have." Nadia nodded her head decisively. Kevin widened his eyes slightly when he heard her answer. He'd actually thought that she'd be tempted to accept, but it was still very gratifying to hear Nadia admitting it personally. "Nadia, have you really thought this through? Joining the Radiants would be considered a betrayal of the Herbalist Society. Aren't you afraid that they'll hunt you down?" Kevin asked with some surprise. Nadia gathered her courage and slowly raised her head to look into his eyes and said seriously, "Kevin, I was hoping that since you're the one who made the suggestion, you would naturally help me deal with that problem. Can I count on you?" "Yes, you can, but why should I trust you? How can you prove that you aren't colluding with the Herbalist Society and that you don't plan to turn on me? What if you really came to the Radiants just to steal the Power Pill formula?" Kevin narrowed his eyes as he tried to read the expression on Nadia's face. Unfortunately, he couldn't see anything. Nadia's mouth felt a little dry as she replied, "Well, how do you want me to prove it?" This was the only thing Nadia could think of saying at the moment. Kevin smiled enigmatically as he thought about Nadia's reply. "To tell you the truth, I have no idea how to prove it." "I can swear a poison oath if you want. If I'm plotting with the Herbalist Society against you, I'm willing to lose all my power and my reputation," Nadia answered quietly. Even though Nadia was practically whispering, Kevin could hear her very clearly. Both of them remained silent for a couple of minutes. Finally, Kevin let out a long breath. "I was just joking with you. Why do you take everything so seriously?" Kevin smiled and said, "I asked you to join the Radiants. Since you're sitting here with me tonight, that's proof enough for me." After that, Kevin talked with Nadia about a lot of things, but didn't mention any news about the Herbalist Society. After more than an hour, Kevin left Nadia's room. When he stepped into the hallway, he took a deep breath. Then Spencer walked over to him and led him to the room where Roger Knott was staying. It was already the middle of the night, but Roger didn't feel tired at all. He was sitting quietly in his room waiting for Kevin's arrival. "Please forgive my late arrival, Mr. Knott, but I just returned to the Radiants a while ago. I'm sorry to disturb your rest." Kevin was very polite. How could he not be polite? Roger Knott was someone who knew that Kevin was a member of the Myriads. More importantly, he still had to deliver the message from Brett Stewart. Knott smiled sincerely and replied, "There's no need to apologize, Deputy. When you get as old as I am, you don't need as much sleep." "May I ask why you've been waiting for me so long? It can't be that you just want to chat with me. Am I right?" Kevin teased him. "The Supreme Commander wrote a letter and asked me to deliver it to you personally." Roger Knott wanted to tell him more, but he hesitated to continue. "A letter from the Supreme Commander? Why would he write to me? I just spoke with him twice on the phone." Kevin raised his eyebrows in surprise. He didn't know what Brett Stewart was up to, but why couldn't he have just told him over the phone? "I wouldn't pretend to know what's on the Supreme Commander's mind, and I couldn't even guess what's in the letter. Perhaps you should read it for yourself."
Roger Knott took out the envelope and handed it to Kevin. "There's no need for me to read the letter right away," Kevin smiled and then asked Knott. "You couldn't have come here in person just to deliver a simple letter. Is there something else on your mind?" Roger Knott held a very high rank in the Myriads. Brett Stewart would never have sent him over without an urgent reason to do so. After visiting Nadia at the Radiant's headquarters, Kevin went to Roger Knott's room to find out why he'd been waiting for him for so long. Knott showed Kevin the letter from Brett Stewart, but he didn't read it right away. After all, he'd just spoken to him twice on the phone. But Kevin really wanted to know if Knott had a reason of his own to want to speak with him in person. Roger Knott chuckled. He'd been an expert for many years, but he'd actually let the young man see right through his thoughts. He felt a little embarrassed. Knott recovered from his embarrassment and explained,
"I know that you and the Supreme Commander are brothers. The friendship between the two of you isn't something that ordinary people ever experience."
Then he got an awkward look on his face as he got to the point.
"It's just that some people in the organization have been spreading rumors recently saying that you betrayed the Myriads and joined with the Radiants just for the herbal pills."
Kevin frowned slightly and nodded. "Then you've come here to visit the camp? What's your opinion now?" Although he looked relaxed on the surface, Kevin's inner emotions were fluctuating wildly. When he first established the Radiants, apart from Dylan Hill and the other 5 Hill siblings, only Spencer knew his true identity. In the eyes of the rest of the Radiants, Kevin was merely a high-ranking official. As far as they knew, Kenneth Wilkinson was the real Chancellor. They had no idea that it was simply Kevin's alter ego. Although Roger Knott still didn't know that Kevin was actually Kenneth Wilkinson, what he was telling Kevin was troubling news. There were obviously spies from the Myriads hiding within the Radiants. If not, how did Roger Knott find out that he was here in the first place? Knott clenched his fists and inquired anxiously,
"Sir, I'd like to ask you something. Have you really joined the Radiants?"
Kevin didn't answer his question right away. Instead, he raised his eyebrows and replied, "Why? Do you want me to join?" Knott replied diplomatically,
"You're a talented man, Mr. Williams. No matter where you go, you'll be able to find success. Besides, you have the Myriad ID in your possession. Other than the Supreme Commander, no one else has the right to interfere with your decision."
Then Roger Knott sighed deeply.
"But I also have to remind you that betraying the organization would be a despicable act. You must not go down this path."
To be honest, he was extremely unwilling to let Kevin join the Radiants. Putting the word betrayal aside, the previous Supreme Commander of the Myriads, Travis Adams, had passed away. Although Brett Stewart was talented, his energy base wasn't high enough to match his new rank. The person with the highest energy base in the organization was actually Milton Brown, who was at level 5. However, Brown was getting on in years. There wasn't much time left for him to protect the Myriads. Kevin was the only other member at a high enough level to help the Supreme Commander. More importantly, Kevin was still young, but he'd already reached an incredibly high level of strength and skill. Who knew how much he could advance into the future? Being so young meant he had a great deal of potential. If either organization wanted to be able to develop and grow, they had to make sure that Kevin was with them to lead the way. In Roger Knott's eyes, Kevin was the most talented person in the Myriads. "You're being too serious, Mr. Knott. Although I'm one of the higher-ups in the Radiants, I didn't really join the organization yet." Kevin looked at Roger Knott's puzzled face and said with a smile, "Kenneth Wilkinson and I are sworn brothers, just like Brett Stewart. He's also my sworn brother. That's why when Kenneth Wilkinson founded the Radiants, I only helped him manage it temporarily. When the organization is finally on the right path in the future, I won't be involved in it anymore."
"So that's how it is."
Roger Knott repeatedly nodded his head.
"It seems that the people in the Myriads are indeed causing trouble with their gossip. They're maliciously insulting you with their accusations."
"Don't worry about it, Mr. Knott." Kevin waved his hand gently. "By the way, sir, there's something you might not know. The Supreme Commander just called me. He's already given up on his plan to attack the Union. The Pinnacle has begun to prepare their invasion, and the threat of them returning is getting more and more serious. So he decided to abandon the headquarters on Herring Island. He'll arrange for the members to be sent temporarily to Chicago, New York, and Detroit. Kevin picked up the coffee pot on the table and poured a cup for Roger Knott. In the dean's office of the Healing Arts School, the results of the negotiations between the various schools had obviously not been satisfactory. Wayne Ford and Harley Shepard looked at each other as they sat on the sofa. Their expressions were extremely solemn. Although the reactions from all the schools left people feeling discouraged, what worried them even more was that their hearts weren't united, and they were each doing their own thing.
What the hell are we going to do?
Wayne Ford slowly leaned back on the sofa and closed his eyes somewhat tiredly.
Nearly 80 groups came here tonight. Only a dozen or so small ones agreed with your plan. Some of them were even graduates from the Healing Arts School. If this continues, what will happen to the Pinnacle?
Harley Shepard let out a faint sigh and his face was full of worry.
What can we do if they don't want to join us?
Wayne Ford shook his head and remarked,
You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Even if we force them all to join together when we finally face the Pinnacle, they're just going to collapse like a house of cards in a strong wind.
The two of them didn't continue their conversation. The office fell into a melancholy silence. Wayne Ford closed his eyes tightly. His body wasn't moving and he looked as if he was sleeping. Harley Shepard lowered his head slightly and looked at the coffee in the mug on the table. The expression in his eyes kept changing as he considered his options, making it hard to tell exactly what he was thinking. A few minutes later, Shepard said,
They're clearly not willing to follow your plan. The most fundamental problem is the power pill. If we can manage to find an herbalist on par with the one in the Radiance or even the Herbalist Society, would everyone still be so hesitant to commit to our cause?
Wayne opened his eyes when he finished speaking. His eyes flashed as he came to a realization.
Let's not talk about whether we can find an herbalist with enough talent to pull this off. I only have one question for you. What can you use to get someone to help us?
Wayne Ford sighed as he reminded his colleague.
You need to be more practical about this whole thing.
What he said hit the nail on the head. Any decent, highly talented herbalist would have a sense of pride about this. One of them would surely be willing to help.
You know, I think I may know of an apothecary who might consider joining us.
Harley Shepard looked up at the ceiling deep in thought and asked,
Isn't Kevin an herbalist? I've also heard that he concocted the life prolongation pill to cure Herman Thompson down in St. Louis.
Wayne Ford frowned slightly when he heard this.
What you said seems to make some sense. But why on earth would Kevin agree to help us?
Everyone needs to do their part to save us from the Pinnacle. Moreover, he's still a student of the Healing Arts School. Can't we simply ask him to help us concoct the pill?
Harley Shepard said with some excitement. Wayne Ford wanted to reply, but he just couldn't find the words.
I'll send someone to find Kevin immediately. As long as he's willing to refine medicinal pills, he won't care that the schools aren't in complete agreement,
Harley Shepard said excitedly as he walked out of the office. In the private room on the top floor of the St. Louis Garden, Jake Morris, who just hung up the phone, was going nuts, smashing almost everything that he could get his hands on in the room.
Damn it! Kevin is just a useless son-in-law. How dare he come down here and mess with me? Jake screamed. If I can't get the power pill formula, how am I going to explain it to my family?
Jake Morris was so angry that his entire body began to shake violently. The few men who were standing nearby all lowered their heads and looked at the floor, not daring to say anything to incur his wrath. They were afraid of what their boss might do next. After a long time, Jake sat down on the floor. His body was emitting terrifying energy, and his eyes looked like they were ready to shoot out flames. The only thing on his mind was getting his hands on the power pill formula and getting revenge on Kevin for his betrayal.